Is it an anachronism, or is there something else going on? In the middle of the Gospel of Mark, while Jesus is in Caesarea Philippi, north of the Sea of Galilee, Jesus tells a crowd listening to him that if they wished to become his followers, they had to deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow him. But since Jesus himself had not yet been crucified, what sense would this have made? Or is it, as I pondered, an anachronism, something that found its way into the written gospel after his crucifixion? Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Tuesday, March 5th, 2024. There's a scene in the movie Apollo 13 that contains an anachronism. An anachronism is when a story includes a detail of something that historically doesn't belong, something that didn't yet exist at the time the story takes place. In the case of Apollo 13, it is a Mr. Coffee drip coffee maker. So there's a discussion going on between two of the engineers about the amount of electrical power the capsule would have to work with to get the spacecraft safely back to Earth. One of the engineers asks how many amps would they have to work with. The other points to a Mr. Coffee and says, barely enough to run this coffee pot for 9 hours. It's a great moment for the audience because it shows in visual terms just how little power 20 amps is. The only problem is, Mr. Coffee hadn't been invented yet. Apollo 13 flew in April 1970. Mr. Coffee wasn't introduced until 1972. Its appearance in the movie is a good example of an anachronism. Which brings me back to today's reading from the Gospel. Because we are straying from the lectionary in worship during Lent this year, I thought that this week I would read the Gospel lessons for each week in Lent, in Year B for the 3-year lectionary cycle. Today I'm looking at the reading for the second Sunday in Lent, which is a portion of the story of the Gospel of Mark. It takes place at a turning point in the Gospel, almost at the exact midpoint of the Gospel. Jesus and his disciples have traveled north from Galilee to the region called Caesarea Philippi. The most memorable part of that excursion comes when Jesus asks his disciples who people say that he is. John the Baptist, Elijah, one of the prophets, they answer. Then he asks the critical question, but who do you say that I am? Peter provides the answer, you are the Christ. In the very next scene, he tells the disciples about his coming passion and death. Not liking what they're hearing, Peter pulls Jesus aside and rebukes him. Jesus, in turn, rebukes Peter with the memorable line, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." Now we come to the portion of the story that may include an anachronism. We read, "He called the crowd with his disciples and said to them, 'If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it. For what will it profit them to gain the whole world and forfeit their life? Indeed, what can they give in return for their life? Those who are ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of them will the Son of Man also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels.'" We know this story and these lines, and they are important for our understanding of what it means to be a follower of Jesus Christ. There's just one problem, of course, and that is the cross has not yet entered the story. What Jesus is getting at makes perfect sense. To follow Jesus means making sacrifices. But taking up one's cross? Well, we understand exactly what it means because we live after the crucifixion. There are, of course, some very reasonable explanations. Some, mostly biblical inerrantists, simply reject the possibility that Jesus himself didn't say these words, or at least at this point. But there are two other significant possibilities. Remember that the earliest written gospel wasn't written until somewhere around 30 years after Jesus' death and resurrection. Anyone who knows anything about human memory knows that we frequently remember things incorrectly or remember things that never actually happened. For example, many of us will swear up one side and down the other that we saw the film of the first plane flying low over Manhattan before slamming into the World Trade Center on that very morning. But the video footage we swear to having seen that day didn't actually appear on TV until months later. In the same way, it is possible that this was something Jesus said after his resurrection, but Mark remembered it as having been part of this conversation before his crucifixion, a simple memory issue. Another possibility is that Jesus himself never said these words, but they became part of the early church's understanding of what it means to be a disciple. Mark could easily have remembered Jesus having said them, even if he never actually did. But here's the thing. Does this in any way call into question the importance of these words for our understanding of what it means to follow Jesus? Absolutely not. Historically accurate or not, they do accurately represent the truth of Christian discipleship, letting go of what we deem important in our lives in order to follow Jesus. And that's why this reading appears during Lent. We need to be reminded that Christian life isn't just about us and what pleases us. It is about self-sacrifice. It is about commitment to something besides ourselves. It is about committing our lives to the kingdom of God, a kingdom that Jesus came to announce, a kingdom that is already here and yet not fully visible. That's what taking up our cross means. The line itself may indeed be an anachronism, but it speaks the truth. Tomorrow, is it another anachronism? Jesus cleanses the temple, but in the Gospel of John, it is one of the very first things he does, not one of the last. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.